harbor town. It's in the harbor. That's the old cannery packing houses. Our fleet is getting smaller and smaller. They have to go many hundreds of miles now to fish because they fished out all the waters. This is a big part of our town of the past. I don't think the future has much of it left. See how old the boats are? Old Italian, Yugoslav families, Greeks. Now most people live in Pedro, don't work in Pedro. It's a bedroom community.
There was something special about Pedro because it was one of the few places anywhere where rich lived next to poor, every nationality lived next to other nationalities, and there was many of each. It was an international town, but with especially represented by Slavs and Southern Europeans that were fishermen, and Portuguese. But then we also had blacks, which in other parts of town didn't have blacks back in the 60s, early 70s, white parts of town.
It's a real sailor's town. A lot of imported people in there working for the Navy and stuff like that.
They never moved to Hollywood. Most bands, they'd start gigging in Hollywood or up in L.A., and first they'd move up there. Well, they didn't. They stayed in Pedro. And they would get on the freeway and come back to the end of the freeway after every gig and be back in Pedro. They would leave Hollywood behind.
I moved here when I was 10, 9 or something, from Virginia, and I met Boon when I was like 12, maybe. 7th grade, the summer before 7th grade.
Do you remember the first time you met him?
I think so. Oh, yeah. I was in a park. I'll take you there another day. Peck Park, walking, and he's playing Army with his friends, and he jumped out a tree on me. I guess he thought I was part of the, the enemy forces. And he had a T-shirt and a green Army helmet. And he jumped on me. It was funny. Then he came over to my apartment. I live in these apartments near his, in the kind of project area, Pedro. I can't take you to because it doesn't exist. They built track homes over it. It's an old Navy housing, World War II. And he came over and recited all this George Carlin record he'd memorized, which I thought was pretty intense. That's the first day I met Boon.
Wow. And did you guys go to the same school at that point, or?
No, he went to Park Western. This is between grade school and junior high. So he went to Park Western, I went to Taper. I just moved out of the Navy housing about 2 miles from there. I'll show you that too. It's across from the graveyard where he's at. And anyway, we went to the same junior high school, Dotson, same high school, San Pedro High. So, yeah, we were leaving one world and entering another kind of together.
In Park Western, I guess we all kind of like developed this like mentality of like, it's sort of like a distrust for like the rich people or just the establishment. Just because it was sort of like like an impoverished area. We'd go to junior high school, Dotson Junior High School, and there'd be like these the rich kids or whatever, and they really wouldn't associate with us. And I guess really that that's where like the punk thing in Dennis and all of us really came from, was that there was this like division that we could sense.
We started playing when we were like 12, 13. Soon after I met him, like his, I think he got a guitar for that Christmas. His mama played guitar. And so she got him one, and I don't know whose idea it was, but we were going to play guitar too. I was going to play with him. So I got mine at Thrifty's, like for 13 bucks. They used to sell these cheap electric guitars on stands in the store, like it was, brooms or mops. We're not Fenders or Gibsons or anything, you understand? And so, okay, we're trying to play these things. And in those days, no one wrote their songs. We played off records. This hippie guy lived in this car named Roy Mendez Lopez. He was a sweet man. Really inspired us in a lot of ways. But he showed us how to learn songs off records, or try to. Yeah, and then we found out you needed a bass for a band. Somehow, we didn't know what a bass was for years.
I've been going all over town introducing this band. It's like the greatest band in California. All they really are is three f***ing corn dogs from Pedro, the Minutemen! Hello. Real things, conditioning, will lose their meaning.
When punk rock started, like Throbbing Gristle and Talking Heads, you couldn't tell what punk rock was. It was all different things, free things. And we wanted to be our weird thing. We never wrote our own songs till punk rock, see? We never know you could. I don't know. Why did we do that? Write our own songs.
Why didn't we?
Yeah.
We just, you know.
No one else did there, you know.
We never
Best
took a
band
class
was-
in songwriting, I guess.
Yeah. And then when we heard these other lame dudes writing songs, it was like, oh man, we can do this. Yeah, we sounded like 100 other bands, so we wanted to get our own style, and we purged all our rock, even though that's what we come from, you know. We did this real perverted format, like no solos, no choruses. This was a way to get our own sound.
We never really, you know, set out to make the press like us, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, it just happened that way.
I think they like the idea of us more maybe than the tunes. You talk to these guys, and they don't know any of our songs. I start talking to them about the songs in an interview, and they don't even know them.
You know, it's...
Some dudes I know they know about them because they'll talk about them in the stories, but I've like talked to these guys, man, and they don't even know the tunes. They don't talk about what's coming out of speaker. They like ideas. These three average guys who work and live in Pedro.
We push ourselves, but we don't push, you know, what we're doing to the point where we don't like it.
Yeah, we like playing, so it mainly revolves around doing gigs.
Yeah, and we do it all the
Records
time
like
in the
gigs.
world, too.
Yeah, we don't have much of an image or something.
Yeah, you worked a 9 to 5
people.
job, you know, you got the nights off, so the weekend. We're not on no mission to become big rock stars or anything like that. We're pretty casual about it. Music, to us, you know, just playing. It always has been. And, you know, now we have this niche that we can, you know, put out records and people will buy them, and hey, it's great. You know, everybody should do it. And there should be a rock band in every block because it can happen.
But yeah, the music thing, it's weird. I don't know how we got into it. I think in a way it was a way to keep us off the streets and out of trouble. It's a bad part of town, you know, kind of. But it was different in those days than it is nowadays. The violence. You see that hole right there? That's from a bullet in my window, you know. I got one in my van, and it's just a heavy thing. Like, I know we were young, bad neighborhoods, but nothing like today. But I think that's why we got into it, really. We didn't know what it was about. We didn't have older brothers. Boon had a half-brother that was much older who was in Vietnam, but we didn't really understand it, all the techniques and shortcuts like stuff like now today. Jesus, we were pretty naive about it. But we did decide that these guitars were kind of lame, and so we got guitars from the thrift store. Or a pawn shop, really, is what it was, over here on 6th Street. And then I got a bass. He had a bass laying around, but it had no holes cut in the nut, so the strings just sat up on the nut. I can show you what nut is. Nut's this part here. Didn't have notches, so the strings were all dead. Ding, 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 ding. It wasn't real sounding, so, but we didn't know that. Somebody sold it to his ma in a pawn store, you know, and pawn shop. So it was crap, you know. Ding, ding, no notes. Didn't want to play it. Did have bigger strings, but we didn't really know that was the thing of a bass. We did find out they had 4 strings, so all I did was take... Boon had this, like that first guitar he got was a kind of, it was electric guitar, but it was hollow body. So we just put 4 strings on that, and then I played that for a couple of years. Couldn't really hear bass. I didn't know, I couldn't tell it, the difference from it from guitar and stuff, so... Yeah, we had a hard time with that. Now, Boon, you know, I think he's a lot more talented. He had a more natural thing for it. Plus, guitar you could hear a lot easier, and he picked it up really quick and really good. And like I said, this hippie guy, Roy Mendez Lopez, showing us things, licks. He'd make his own guitars. He really had this idea against not going with the herd and going your own way and finding your own voice and practice. That was his... He would go, practice. He had a higher voice. He was a great guy. Really good values. Good ideas. He didn't, I mean, he could play like intense. Classical, he'd get Bach. He got Boon into flamenco, classical, you know. Rock and roll, you know, to him it was just a thing. And the stuff, of course, us being young and everything wanted to do it. That's why we had him show us how to learn songs off records and things. But I'm glad he didn't put too much emphasis. Or we didn't get that excited. We did learn licks and stuff, but not that much. Because I think that kept us open enough to try to make our own music.
tell you, I went to school with Mike and Dee, and we graduated the same year. But I didn't know them guys. I seen them around school and stuff, but I didn't know them as friends. I ended up meeting Mike out of school to a friend of mine, drinking buddy. And I don't know, I guess I knew Mike quite a few months. I was probably about 19 then, and he used to tell me, yeah, come on over, play drums with me. Well, I had a shed at my house at the time, and I would play with other guys, you know, we jam in there and stuff. So I was kind of reluctant to play with Mike because, well, a lot of my friends I hung around with at the time were kind of rowdy. And Dee and Mike were not very kind of rowdy dudes in a way.
You know, punk was a kind of intense thing. George was a very popular guy, too. I guess he took the most blows. We had a lot of friends, you know, but not as many as he did. And, yeah, kind of like people got very upset. Like, oh, you're with those guys. You know, for us, it was like a musical thing, you know. This is the way we could do gigs. For other people, it was like, they felt very threatened by it. Oh, man, it was hilarious. I'd laugh. The whole masculinity or whatever, everything. Traitors, they thought you were. We just laughed. But then, you know, you'd meet other friends at the gigs. That was the neat thing about punk. All the weirdos from all over town would gather. You couldn't fit in where they were. You know, that's the whole reason for punk. People could not fit in. We all got together.
Punk bands. I lived in Wilmington, and I lived in San Pedro, and I used to drive up Harbor Freeway to Hollywood and to LA to check out punk bands about 3 nights a week or something. A lot of the early punk rock groups from LA played at the Hong Kong. So we would drive up there. It was like another, you know, it was like, let's go, you know, there's something to do because it was so boring around our neighborhood and, you know, hanging out with people we used to hang out with, you know. So we used to go up there, and through hanging out, people would hang out in front of the Hong Kong and talk and drink. There was a lot of drinking. And we met someone, Jack met someone who was mentioning this place called the Church or something in Hermosa, you know. They said, why don't you come to the church? Black Flag's playing. Or we had seen Black Flag before, though, or I had at some other, at an outdoor gig. It was Pollywog Park. I think that's what it was called. I think it was in Manhattan Beach, which is near Hermosa Beach, where Black Flag was staying at the church. And it was supposed to be a nice little afternoon outdoor concert thing. And there were all these people kind of sitting up on the grass, you know, and kind of, I don't know, they had a certain style back then, you know, and they'd look at the punks, you know, and they sort of really hated them, you know, they just kind of, I remember walking around the park there, checking people out, and they were just kind of sneering at me, you know. You know, they just really hated it, you know, they just... So anyway, I went to the car, I think. I walked drive out to the car to get like some beer that was in the trunk or something with a friend, and all of a sudden I heard this, you know, I was thinking, man, let's get back over there. Somebody's starting up. You know, this Black Flag starting up. I could just feel it from, you know, across the park. There was some kind of power, some energy coming across. So we just got our beer and we went, you know, hightailed it back to where the stage was. And we got there, and all these people that were picnicking and lounging about, you know, in their little colorful shorts and stuff, they were throwing garbage and beer cans and everything they could towards the stage, you know. It was just really exciting, and Keith Morris was in the band then, and he was really in great form.
I don't know if people know it, Pearl Jam and all this, but that scene, you know, or anybody else in singles, but that scene, that whole circuit was set up by Black Flag. They were the first ones to go out and get them clubs happening and the network going. A lot of these young kids, I mean, Ed from Ohio too. You know, he stepped right into a thing that a lot of guys had to bust butts to build. Our first gig, yeah, as the Minutemen was, I think May 22nd, 1980, at Harbor College in Wilmington, California. And it was with the Gears and Red Cross. Greg came to the gig. He was very impressed and asked us to be on his label. And we're SST-002, so.
How long did it take before you guys actually ended up touring with Black Flag and stuff like that after you made the record?
Oh yeah, we would not tour until 82 or something. We didn't tour the first couple of years. We wouldn't do interviews. We were very intense and strict that way.
First time we toured, with Black Flag, boy, was that spooky. That was crazy. Let's see, we flew out to the east coast somewhere, and we packed into this van, and there was like 20 dudes in this Chevy van. We had to like lay like sardines side by side along the ceiling. I mean, jeez, man, I almost had phobias going there. That was pretty wild. And we did some shows. It was rough, you know. The vans we had were shitty, and you know, we got by the best way we could. You know, we didn't have money backing us or nothing like that.
You know, all the SST bands and SST affiliate bands like New Alliance, they toured a whole lot, and they would just throw their stuff in the back of a van, you know, like 6 guys in a van or 2. And they travel across the United States or play down south or something like that. No hotels, no per diem, you know. These guys are eating at AM, PM, and they're living on black coffee.
I wanted to do something with the Minutemen again because they were the band that I liked the most of any, and I was particularly friends with Boon. And I think they really, you know, like, I know Mike and Chuck Dukowski and some of those people had come out to the Neubauten show, and they're like, oh, what are you going to do next? You know, what are you going to do? So I said, well, let's, you know, sort of pay homage to Pedro. You know, let's do something from the harbor. And so I started I was getting unemployment then, and I had time. And so I went down there and just started checking things out, and went around Pedro with, you know, met Boon there and stuff, and sort of checked things out. And somebody, I don't know how this all came about, but I was trying to figure out how I could rent a boat. And there was like these party boats that, you know, they have like reggae tour, whatever, the harbor, and that was really expensive. I wanted to do something that would still be affordable for people. And somebody put me onto the whale watching boat, so I met these people that own this whale watching boat, the Cormorant, and somehow managed to, you know, talk them into letting me charter it for, I think it was like, you know, $100 an hour. It was really a lot of sort of focused yet explosive energy, because you had a very small area with these amps stacked up. You had Boon, Mike, and George like packed onto a little stage with all these, with this boat rocking, and Boon was still jumping up and down, you know, with all of his force, and people had this little condensed slam pit, and so everyone was worried about somebody falling overboard, you know. So it was like this really, I don't know, this little burst of energy.
This one is a rival petition. Our philosophy is an apple so faded. Is a girl pursues a different mission. He is born in sour. Not be dead, tag the victim. Your wrist, change the hostage. We are fighting with our head.
look like a dork. Shout out against the Nazis, the wheels kind of sexy. It's picture the charging dance, if I heard for the show, we cut on a song, and cut them down with the pop. Niggas big cracks. Organize the foot down to murder is okay. You be on the big sweat point. And I was there, ever without you. Coming around, coming back for just a second. I'll peek, I guess. Alcohol is just way too big. Alcohol is just way too big. As many people out here to go to that.
I had the good fortune to ride hour after hour with Dennis in a van after the gig, or gigs from city to city. He did these very intricate finger moves as well as sang, and the whole stage would move because he was a very big man. He was big physically, and he was big spiritually, and he was big mentally, and he had a tremendous presence. And you work that close together, you drive in a van, it's easy to get edgy, it's easy to snap, but when the lights were down, afterwards, it was sweaty D. Boon. It was just this, you know, it was Dennis, it was Mike, it was George, it was three guys who did the unbelievable. They went city to city in like an American vaudeville, sharing their perspective, their feelings, their thoughts, their abilities with people. And there was a lot of ability present. I mean, these guys played hour after hour after hour. They rehearsed, they were tight, they were very critical of one another in a sense of like expecting the best. You didn't see a sloppy show. And for those of us that were other performers and watched this, it set a real prerequisite of attentive professionalism that we would also give to a punk rock or to a hardcore audience, something that they weren't used to seeing. Far from the self-indulgent, let's go out with a bottle of Jack Daniels and let's get fucked up and let's indulge ourselves with the audience. No, Dennis was out there to, and Mike and George, if I might be able to speak for them also, we were very convinced as the opening act, they wanted to connect. The show was then, there was no dress rehearsal. That was the show, that was the moment, that was real.
I think a lot of his heroes really were the early founding fathers. You know, he'd make references to them a lot as kind of like the spirit of America, you know, the freedom thing, you know, it's just like, what's going on here? What, you know, the founding fathers, if they knew, kind of thing, would be very upset.
One night we played in Washington, D.C., and as we loaded out, Dennis said to me, see that door over there? And I was like, yeah. He said, that's the Ford Theater door. That's where John Wilkes Booth pushed his way out with a broken leg. I mean, there were always, instead of stories about chicks and dudes and how high and how much and all of that, there were stories of history. There were stories of Gettysburg and Shiloh and Chickamauga and real testaments to people like ourselves that had been young once, whose lives and their blood had been spilled, sometimes on a domestic battlefield, but more often than not, spilled overseas in the pursuit of liberty, or what America was really supposed to be about. To go on tour with Dennis and the Minutemen in at this time in 1984, we recognized the fact that America was in a very scary position with Ronald Reagan fighting an illegal war and lying to Congress. Dennis was well aware of that and would take times every evening to share with the audience a little bit about what our government was doing.
Minutemen started a few months before Reagan was elected. Minutemen totally were in the shadow of the Reagan era. A lot of ways, and, you know, we had this belief that the country was built by complainers, and we were part of that tradition.
What kind of jobs did he have?
Oh, we had all kinds. We had a bunch together, like Jack in the Box. I was running the parking lot for the Catalina terminal here down in the port, and I hired him on there. He worked at a Denny's. He worked at Nichols Institute, being a janitor. He'd done tons of jobs. So did I. See, the thing about jobs was a funny thing. If you wanted a good job that paid a lot, you would have to give them more of your life, more of your time. So it'd be this, and then that means less for the band. So it was so endless compromises. I could tell you how many songs came from jobs. Like This Ain't No Picnic was about him working an auto parts counter, and this guy would not let him listen to soul music.
Was a hell of an explosion, and well, I guess that's all, sir.
I heard about D. Boon dying on Christmas Day, right afterwards, and because Brett got a phone call because people were looking for Mike Watt to tell him. And, you know, the two different stories is basically, you know, the driver fell asleep at the wheel, but I really tend to think that that's, you know, really oversimplifying it. I know that it was very late at night, and she probably had a variety of highway hypnosis, so I doubt that she was asleep, but she might have been, you know, a little like, you know, zoned. You know, it's late at night, you're out in the desert, you're just like looking at that center line. And she told me that the rear axle of the van broke, and also that Dennis's dad later came over and looked at the van and told her, said, yeah, Linda, that's what happened, the rear axle broke. Because this is what Linda told me. She said she was driving, and, you know, she's just sort of like, you know, at the wheel, eye on the road, and everything sort of going by. Janine's sitting next to her asleep. Dennis is in the back asleep. And suddenly this, like, this thing happened, and they just, like, went off the road. And Dennis flew out the back, and his neck was broken. And I know that Janine was paralyzed from the waist down, and Linda smashed her ankle.
Watt played for years. Punk rock changed our lives. We learned punk rock in Hollywood. Drove up in Pedro. We were fucking corn dogs. We'd go drink and pogo.